Good day. My name is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. Today in our show, we have Matt Dunne. He is running for the governorship of Vermont on the Democratic ticket. It's good to have you on the show.
It's great to be here in Newport.
What positions have you? I know you were in the legislature before, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senate and House both?
Yep.
Okay. Can you tell us how long you were in each?
Sure. So I grew up in Heartland, Vermont.
Okay.
And went off to college. And in 1992, the same year that I graduated from college, my home community of Heartland elected me to the legislature at the age of 22.
Oh, okay.
So I served for 7 years in the House, including being in leadership during the end of that tour. I was then asked by the Clinton administration to come to Washington to head up the AmeriCorps Vista program, where I oversaw 6,000 full-time people in the effort to empower people out of poverty. I then came back and was elected to 2 terms in the state Senate.
Very good. So you actually worked in Washington as well?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
You probably know a senator that. See, I used to live in Springfield,
Vermont.
and I moved.
Yeah.
I moved up here in 1998. But
Yep.
You probably know Dick McCormick.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Was just with him yesterday. He's supporting me in my run.
And who was the other legislator that I knew well was Cheryl Rivers.
Sure.
Is she still in it or not?
She's not in politics, although she's certainly involved. She's also supporting me.
Oh, okay.
But she hasn't been in elective office. She's been connected with her community.
Oh, okay. And now, so when did you last serve in the legislature?
So my last year in the legislature was in 2006.
Okay.
And since that time, I've been the head of community affairs for Google. And running that program from an office in the old Tip Top Bread Factory building in downtown White River Junction, Vermont.
Okay. Now, how many other candidates are running on the Democratic side?
At this point, there's only one.
Just one?
Yep.
And who is that?
That's Sue Minter.
Okay, I think I have heard of her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just you and she running on the Democratic side?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And on the Republican side, who's running?
So there's Bruce Lissman,
Okay.
who's a Vermont native from Burlington, who is an executive on Wall Street,
Okay.
and who's come home, and he's running. And then Phil Scott, who's the current lieutenant governor.
Okay. So does it appear that you've got an uphill battle against people, say from Burlington and from people who worked on Wall Street even?
Well, I don't know if it's an uphill battle. I think Vermonters like to evaluate their candidates for what they've contributed to their state, and we are excited about the energy that has been coming to our campaign. We've got a lot of young people who are involved. We've got a group of retired folks who are excited about a campaign to build an economy for the next generation. We even have folks who are Vermonters who grew up here but are no longer living in Vermont. They had to leave for a job,
Okay.
but they're supporting the campaign because they are excited about creating a Vermont where they can move home and raise their family here.
Who do you see as your biggest challenger?
Oh, I think it's all yet to be determined. Certainly the lieutenant governor, who's been a part of Montpelier for the last 6 years, is well known. Bruce Lissman is running a very strong and aggressive campaign already on the Republican side.
I have heard of him. Yes.
And Sue's an old friend, which is the way it works in Vermont. So we're just going out there sharing our message because what we believe is critically important is that we bring a fresh start to the way that we approach government in Vermont, and that we focus on building an economy that works for all Vermonters and for all of Vermont.
Yes, and do you see a major difference in the Republican agenda versus the Democratic agenda? Because I know Vermont is different.
Yep.
Thankfully, we're different. Because in Washington, it's extremely divisive.
Absolutely.
Do you see a big difference, or is the gap not quite so big as it is in Washington?
Well, it's certainly not as dysfunctional as it is in Washington. I mean, Washington is really an embarrassment. When you get to the point where the U.S. Senate is saying that they're not going to even talk to or consider a Supreme Court nominee from a seated president, you're running into truly a constitutional crisis. So I just think that things in Washington are terrible. It makes Vermont look great, on the other hand. I have to say, I feel very thankful to be a Vermonter and to be doing politics in Vermont. I would say the major difference is that I believe that our state is struggling right now. That we've got poverty that's rising, we've got young families who can't stay here because they can't find jobs that will support their family. We have an opiate epidemic which is affecting people across the state. And I think the major difference is that the Republican Party is the party of just stop everything. Just stop. Don't do anything. We can't be trying to solve these problems. We can't be working to bring high-speed internet to our entire state and just put the kibosh on any new initiative. And I don't think we can afford to do that. We need to bring a fresh approach.
Absolutely.
I believe we need to focus on the economic issues and create a platform on which we can become the telecommuting capital of the world, where we can support our entrepreneurs to create jobs, where we can do a microenterprise loan fund, where we can help people who are either displaced workers or underemployed build their own business and refill our main streets with vibrant companies that are being able to deliver services locally but also around the world. And that is where I think we need to go, because if we just stop everything or keep going the way we are, we're going to continue to spiral downhill, and we won't have a place that my kids are going to be able to return to in order to be able to succeed.
Well, you understand probably as well as anyone else the saying that goes, that which does not change will die. And it seems that there are a core group of people who don't want anything to change.
Right.
And I'm not going to point any fingers, but we see it here in Newport also.
Sure.
So what do you see as the one of the things, just pick one thing that you think, you spoke about high-speed internet.
Sure.
And I know that a Democratic legislator from up in this area, her name is Sam Young, who's very big into this.
Sure.
So how would you propose to really push this initiative? Because in my opinion, high-speed internet's a no-brainer. Everyone should have it.
Absolutely.
If you're on dial-up, you're basically, you're screwed.
Right. Well, it's the electricity of our time. Right, and the community in our country, in the U.S., that was the last to get electricity was here in Vermont. We need to not have that happen with broadband, and we don't have to. And in fact, in the last 5 years, in my work at Google, we were actually able to deliver high-speed internet to communities across the country, both urban and rural. And so the experience that I was able to have in understanding how to get that done, what it costs. And by the way, it's harder to do than to talk about, but it's doable. And I now have a very strong understanding of the economics, the way that we could bond to be able to develop the fiber optic connectivity, and then to be able to get providers to lease back that fiber optic connectivity to be able to bring broadband to Vermonters all across the state, as well as cell service. We have to do it. Because if we want an economy that's going to succeed, we need to be a place where people can innovate, not just at work, but in their spare bedroom, their garage, out in the barn. And we also need to make sure that if people want to live here and work for large corporations that are elsewhere, they can do that. But they've got to have the internet connectivity. And I've run a team that's spread out all across the country and has responsibilities all over the world. And I've been able to do that from White River Junction, Vermont. We can do that here, and in fact, I think it is a large part of the future of our economy.
As a matter of fact, isn't White River Junction the lowest or the second lowest in unemployment?
It is. It is right up there. I'm not
And
sure.
that's not a big city like Burlington or even Rutland.
No, it's just but it's got a lot going on.
Exactly.
And it's got a lot of innovative things. If you look in downtown White River Junction, I was in this building, which is an old bread factory building. And you have software companies, you have publishers, you have folks who are designing architecture and new buildings. You have people who are taking old photographs and making them look like new. It's really got all of those pieces of an economy. There's a transportation consulting firm with dozens and dozens of employees right around the corner. So it's doable.
Plus, you've got West Lebanon, Lebanon, and Hanover.
Dartmouth College right there. Absolutely.
And that's got to be a big help to you.
Yeah, absolutely. But all of the beautiful downtowns that we have all up and down 91 and across our state are the places that we need to focus to be able to grow our economy. Because we can't just have growth in one location. It throws us out of balance.
I know, and I think this was brought up when Governor Douglas was in.
Yep.
Wasn't he, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he try to mandate high-speed internet for the entire state?
He started an initiative and created an authority to be able to make that happen. And he actually authorized $40 million in bonds to be able to deploy high-speed internet. They just never used it. Never used it.
Because I think one of the concerns, like I said, you would probably know this better than me, but this is what I heard, is essentially he said, you're not going to keep building out of Burlington. You're going to get into some of these smaller communities where it's not as urban as Burlington, because that's where it's really needed.
Exactly.
Burlington really didn't need it. They already had it.
Right. And we need to finish that job. And we've had some progress. I mean, down in Springfield, Vermont, with Vermont Telephone Company, they brought world-class internet to their residents there. And we've seen it in other pockets around the state. But we have to make it for the rest of the state, and I just feel very fortunate that in the job that I've had for the last 5 years, I've had hands-on experience about how to actually get it done. We can do it here.
Oh, okay. Now, do you see this broadband coming about in the form of DSL, cable, or satellite?
None of those. So actually it would be through a combination of two things. One is fiber optic, which is the fastest speed that's out there. There's nothing faster than light, at least not yet. But the other is something called low frequency spectrum, which is the same frequency that you used to get your television over. So UHF and VHF, all of that converted over to digital. And we now have that spectrum that's available that goes through, trees and hills and walls that we can deliver wirelessly to parts of the state as well. And there are entrepreneurs that are really excited to be a part of a state that wants to actually deliver internet in that way. So
DSL, cable, and satellite internet is going to be a thing of the past, you think?
I think it will be. It will become outdated. DSL has its limits. If you're really close to the box, you can get decent speeds, but the further out you get, it slows way down. And satellite is very expensive, and the upload speeds are very, very low just by its natural design. We can do better than that.
Cable is probably the fastest one at the moment?
It is. It is. But if it's still coax, anyway, you want to be able to get to fiber as far as you can, and then low-frequency spectrum promises for great distribution even beyond that.
I would have to say that probably there are other countries that are doing this already.
I was talking to, yes, there certainly are. In fact, other countries have much, much faster internet than we do. A lot of them use that sort of concept of common carrier fiber optics that multiple providers can then compete for your business on, which I think is a good way to do it. But I'm friends with Bill McKibben, who's a known environmentalist.
Okay.
And I remember he said at an event a little while ago, he was on the Mongolian steppe, and he was getting 4G on his cell phone. And his comment was, Matt, I think we can do better here. And it's absolutely true. We just need to make it a priority.
I think you're right. And as a matter of fact, that sounds very exciting. For example, my son lives in Los Angeles, and he was telling me he's been reading up on internet speeds. And he says Sweden, a little country like Sweden, has like 10 times faster internet than we have.
Absolutely. Or Korea, we can do a lot better.
Good. Can you tell us, what is your level of education?
So I graduated from Brown University
in
1992, and then I went straight into the legislature and into business. And in some ways, I got the experiential Master's in Public Administration and the experiential MBA from mentors and friends who allowed me to go out and try things.
Well, you can't really argue with the Ivy League education, can you?
Well, the education comes in all kinds of forms. In fact, some of my friends who went to the University of Vermont worked a lot harder than I did. But I was very blessed. It was interesting because my community, I grew up in Heartland, and my ancestors are actually from the Northeast Kingdom.
Okay.
My grandmother grew up on Highland Avenue.
Okay.
Her father was the first water and sewer commissioner of Newport.
Wow.
And so
you have some roots here.
Absolutely, and that's why we ended up here. And something happened when I was a kid who really shaped my outlook on the world, which was that my father passed away when I was 13.
So you're a businessman also.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Now, how does being a businessman help you in your candidacy and what you can bring to the table?
Well, I think if the concern is the future of the economy of Vermont and being able to grow jobs, I think it helps a lot to have experience in business. And specifically, I had experience in helping grow a Vermont-based company to over 100 employees. It was called Logic Associates. It was based down in Wilder, Vermont. And that gives you an experience for what it takes to actually grow those kinds of jobs, recruit the kind of workers, and create that kind of value. And we were serving commercial printers all over the world from Little Wilder, Vermont. And it gave me a sense of what could be and what we need to do as a state to be able to promote it. And then at Google, I've been involved with public-private partnerships with cities all over the country that are the same size as the entire state of Vermont. Right?
Wow.
Population, budget, sometimes even close to geography. And that experience has let me understand firsthand what works, what doesn't, and what kind of things we can do as a state to bring capital to be able to build that infrastructure for success.
Well, that is a major point. Is trying to build, to keep going with what has been started already.
Yeah.
One thing I'm going to just divert just slightly from this.
Sure.
I noticed that you're one of the few politicians here in Vermont that has endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
I think you might have been the first one.
That may be right, although David Zuckerman also did, and I think Kay should have. But anyway, it was certainly early in the process.
Yeah. Because just lately, I think Peter Welch did.
Yep, that's right.
And there are a couple of Democrats that haven't.
Correct.
And I've had some words with them also, and has to do with party over people. Mm-hmm. But that's another whole story. What made you decide to support Bernie?
Well, look, I've grown up following Bernie Sanders.
Yes,
and
haven't we all?
Absolutely. No, it's and what he's talking about are the issues of our time. The loss of the middle class, the amount of debt that's on the shoulders of our young people, and I think a loss of confidence certainly in Washington and unfortunately in political institutions in general. And so he hasn't changed a bit, right?
No.
This is what I love about him. But it was the issues that I felt were important to be out there. And that was before any of us thought he would be able to take off and really capture the imagination of Vermonters, but people across the country. And what he's then done is brought so many young people and people who didn't feel like they had a stake in the political future, and gave them a voice, and they're responding. And now he's winning state after state across the country, and it's really, really exciting. So it was fairly easy to step up for a Vermonter who stood up there for us. That with Bernie Sanders in the White House, if the governor of the state of Vermont called, he'd take the call, and if I talked to him about a problem we were facing in Newport, he would know what we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's great to see him just continuing to keep that message going forward and the support that's coming with that.
You know that where he grew up in Brooklyn, New York, was not far from where I was born.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I spent the first 5 years of my life in Brooklyn.
Nice.
And it wasn't too far apart.
Yep.
Although our ages, I think he's maybe 8 to 10 years older than I am.
Gotcha.
I guess, something like that. What do you propose for one of the biggest concerns Vermont has about moving forward as opposed to getting lagged behind? Because, we've had this thing with this new healthcare initiative,
right,
that has not exactly gone smoothly. But
no.
So how do you propose to move on some of these issues, or even that issue for that matter?
Sure. Well, Look, we need to continue down the road towards universal health care.
Exactly.
Because what we're doing now is going to bankrupt us. I mean, the cost of health care in Vermont is continuing to go up $650,000 a day in a state of 620,000 people. So we know it doesn't work. And in fact, in the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of serving on the board of Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. And I thought I knew something about healthcare before. Turned out I had a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a very, very interesting time as the Affordable Care Act was being implemented and as we started to build out the ACO, which is to create a real system across healthcare providers throughout the state and the region. And what gives me some confidence that we can do something about it is that the providers know that what we're doing is not sustainable. We got to move away from this volume-based business where the incentive and reimbursement is all based on how many procedures you can fit into a half hour and how many times you can get the MRI machine to roll. And that's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
But the implementation of the Health Connect website was a disaster.
Yeah.
And it unfortunately has made people lose a little bit of confidence. We need to build back that confidence. We need to make sure that we have management that can actually project manage the kinds of interface with Vermonters in a modern day. And that's experience that I have had in the past. I know who I would bring together to make sure that we can make a system that is less expensive, that is very effective, and that actually delivers the services and communication that Vermonters expect and deserve. From there, once we build back that confidence, then we can move to a different way of reimbursing, so we're actually paying doctors and hospitals for public health, and then continue down the road for actually reaching universal health care. But in the meantime, job one is going to be able to bring in the management and the management skills to be able to deliver and build back confidence of Vermonters.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that the United States spends more on health care in administration? We don't have a universal health care system. We seem to think our system is the best, and yet we rank 32nd in the world on life longevity.
No, we're more like a third world country in.
We're tied with Cuba.
Yeah, no, and particularly with things like infant mortality rates.
Oh, yeah.
It's unacceptable, and we can do something about it. And I believe that Vermont, hopefully in collaboration with other states around us, can actually move in a direction that can lead the country, because we can't afford not to.
Oh, I definitely agree, and I'll give you an example. Some states, of course, have fought the Affordable Health Care Act,
right,
and they won't implement it.
Right.
I believe Texas and Georgia are two of them. Whereas where my son lives, who lives in Los Angeles, Jerry Brown, the governor, said this will work and you will make it work, and it has.
Right.
For the first time in his life, in his adult life, he's had insurance.
Right. Right.
So would you propose something like that?
Absolutely. We got to make sure that everyone pays and everyone is covered. Because right now we're not in a state where people would be okay with a pure marketplace, as they sometimes talk about, where if someone doesn't have insurance and they show up in the emergency room needing life-saving treatment, we're not the kind of state that will say, all right, kick them back out. Right? That's just, and as long as that's the case, we need to make sure that we've got people covered so that they get the treatment as early as possible when it's the least expensive. You don't have to be, a Yankee Vermonter to know that prevention makes a huge difference in our overall cost structure. And in fact, it came home to me. I during my last election, in the last 5 days, my brother had a stroke and almost died.
Okay.
And it's, both of our parents had passed, and so I hightailed it back to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. And, when we were rushing him to the emergency room to have an operation on his head to save his life, we were not looking at price charts, right? We were not going around and saying, oh, well, maybe we should go to one of these other No, you go and you get the treatment. And, he had 2 part-time jobs, neither of which had insurance. And as a result, not only was there a huge amount of debt that ended up coming back on all of us, but he also didn't have a primary care physician.
Yeah.
So we had specialist after specialist after specialist coming into the room. They were asking me to make decisions about, the future of his health care, even though they were giving different diagnoses, each one having not talked to the other one. And that's just crazy. And you know that wasn't a good use of their time or the cost for all those specialists coming in, much less getting the care that was necessary for him to be able to have the recovery that he has. And we're very fortunate, that he's still with us and able to be there for his two boys. But it highlighted for me that we need to actually create a system of healthcare that delivers high-quality healthcare for people at a price that is more in line with what Vermonters can afford.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And it's not going to be as easy as one size fits all, but if you have one system, it's better than having to deal with 17 or 18 systems.
Absolutely.
And all the bureaucrats that go with them.
Yeah, and some of the proposals of, we should just turn it all over to the federal government. Well, I don't know who thinks it's a good idea for us, if we have to deal with our health insurance in this interim time, that we've got to get a hold of someone in Washington, D.C. to solve our problems or issues that we're going to inevitably run into. And so that's unfortunate that's the direction some folks are proposing. We can do it in Vermont. You got to have the right leadership and the right team to make it happen, and then we can actually chart our own destiny.
Okay, moving along here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel about renewable energy?
So I'm a fan of renewable energy. Climate change is real. You didn't have to have a winter like this to know that the Earth is heating up.
Things are a bit funky,
and
aren't they?
It's not. Look, and if you talk to anyone, whether they work at a ski area or they make a living over the winter plowing driveways, this is having a real impact. And I haven't talked to my friends who do sugaring, but I know they are freaked out by what they are seeing. So we have to continue to reduce our carbon footprint, and Vermont has to do our part, hopefully to lead the way for the rest of the country. So some of that is in renewable energy, hopefully at a Vermont scale and perspective, but the other part is actually doing more efficiency work. And one of the proposals that we're putting on the table, something I learned about being a part of doing one in New York, is an energy efficiency fund. And what you can do is we believe we can front load about $100 million to do energy efficiency work in apartment buildings around the state of Vermont. And you don't pay for it out of the general fund, you pay for it by the differential on the utility bill. So the utility bill comes down, you take a part of that, and you use it to pay back that $100 million over the course of 20 years. And what it will do is put contractors to work right away. It'll improve those apartment buildings, many of which have depreciated a lot. It'll reduce costs for Vermonters who live in those apartment buildings, and it's the least expensive way to reduce our carbon footprint.
You must be familiar with Efficiency Vermont?
Absolutely, and that's who I was collaborating with to put together this proposal.
They actually helped me in a couple of ways, and one of which was a far more efficient refrigerator.
Sure. And
a couple of other appliances. Because after a while, my wife bought this house, I believe it was in 1992, but the house is really old, and the stuff that was in there, it was getting very old. Hot water heater was getting very old, and they're not very efficient.
Sure.
This stuff was made in the 40s or 50s even, and it's really not very efficient,
Yeah.
So you would work more with Efficiency Vermont?
Absolutely. They are. Efficiency Vermont is so good. Not only are they reducing the cost for Vermonters across the state, they're now doing work for Washington, D.C. and I think Ohio. So in some ways it's becoming our own sort of niche business because we were very good at it. And they're exporting value and importing cash to the state of Vermont because of their good efficiency work. And I don't know a Vermonter who doesn't want to save money on their utility bill.
Yeah, and that's been a point of contention. I know that some senators, I'm not going to name any names, but some senators have said that wind and solar costs more than, say, Hydro-Quebec or whatever. But I'm not so sure that, I don't know if that's the case or not.
I think it's important that we look at renewable energy across the board, and the more that we can get to have our own energy sources as we're looking into the future, I think the better. We got to do it in the Vermont way, and I do think the new rules that are being proposed by the Public Service Board are good and actually reflecting some of the concerns that have arisen as we have started down this path towards a renewable energy target of 90% by 2050. So we need to continue to do that. We actually built 150 kW of solar on my property on the back of an old sand pit. We worked with the neighbors to find the right siting, and we were connected to three-phase power so that the energy that comes out of there all goes into the grid rather than losing it when there's less of or a smaller conduit to be able to get the energy out. So that was so anyway, it was a good experience for me just to see it on the ground. But I believe we need to continue to focus on reducing our carbon footprint.
Sounds like a good idea. Now, if someone wants to contact you, do you have a phone a phone number, email, or website you'd want to share with us, and we will put up a graphic for that?
Sure. So the best way is through our website, which is www.mattdunne.com. It's MATTDUNNE. If you leave off the E, you get a Hollywood photographer who doesn't know what Act 46 is or why everyone's so upset about it. So just check in there. We do have a phone number, 802-478-0858, for those who don't use the internet and want to get in touch with us and talk about issues that are connected with the state of Vermont and our future.
Sounds good. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I wish you all the best. And as a matter of fact, probably somewhere towards the, maybe nearer to the election or even after the election, we'll have you back on again. This has been an eye-opener for me because there's a lot of information that I didn't know, and it's good that people get to hear this. Absolutely. That's the benefit of a campaign, particularly in a great state like Vermont. Yeah, thank you very much. For all you folks out there, this is Terry Difazio for Dial It Up, saying we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good day.